So I'm Mark Curphey, and I guess I had the kind of evening slot. This whole presentation originally started in the States as an after-dinner speaking slot, so it's not a kind of formal speaking thing. And the way it'll work is that there's a whole bunch of topics, and I will just talk about the topics, and hopefully we'll get some heckling, interruptions, whatever. I'm free with it all. Once people get through the second round of beers, I'm sure everyone will get even more lively. Anyone Japanese in here? No? Does anyone know what that means? Top line. Pechakucha is this Japanese way of doing these speeches. I went to this security conference in the States, and the speaker spent the first 15 minutes introducing himself and reading line by line about himself. So I decided there's a whole better way to do it. So for those of you who can't tell, I'm British. I lived in America, and I lived in Atlanta, and the people used to go, "You're not from around here, boy, are you?" They used to stick up a slide like that. It soon figured it out. Being British is not necessarily a good thing today, of course. At this point, I have a 1 in 2 chance of some nasty person sending all my personal data around the world. This man is called Alistair Darling, and he is far from the darling of the British people right now, let me tell you. It's kind of a bizarre thing in England. So if you've ever been to England, you know that we are the most watched country on earth, right? We have more video cameras everywhere. We have more X-ray stuff at all the airports. So I can only propose that what we're trying to look for is some guy like this. It's going to be an X-ray of Homer, right? Who was it that's decided to stick 25 million people's personal data on 2 disks and stick it in the regular mail? It had to only have been Homer, right? It's kind of bizarre. But it gives me a general reminder about life. So I think Bruce Schneier came up with this quote first, right? It's like, if you think technology is the solution to the problem, you don't understand the problem in the first place, because that whole stuff has been around for ages. There was no reason why that should have been done like that. It's just downright ridiculous. So in case you hadn't figured out, are we able to dim the lights of the presentation? I don't know. Maybe.
Total darkness.
Whoa, total darkness and beer, that may not be a good idea.
Would you like to see how it works?
Just dim them, I'm sure it'll be fine. So here's the intro about me. So as you can tell, I enjoy beer. I enjoy sharing beers with other people. Cheers. I had a misspent youth. I drank too much beer and thought I was going to be a musician. It was an awful time when you wake up with a hangover and realize that you're an absolute crap musician. So I had to go get a job. I went to this place in the UK. Anyone read the Da Vinci Code? A bunch of people. You were there as well? Fantastic. Good man. So Royal Holloway is a fantastic place. Sophie Neveu, the French cryptographer, was educated there. I was there back in the 90s. We used to spend a lot of time up here on the 3rd floor, which is the girls' dorm room, but we won't go into that after a few beers. You get to drink a lot of beer at Royal Holloway, as you will well know, down the Student Union every night. There you go. Good man, he's already halfway through his first. You can tell he was there. He's a genuine article. I then went to work in London, City of London, for a whole bunch of time. Whoop. So spent some time in London working for a bunch of investment banks. Oh, that's fine. That's good. Yay. I can still see my beer. There is no hope of that. I think there was someone at the back who was a gentleman who had lots of blusher on as well, so I can no longer see him, which is absolutely fantastic as well. So I spent a bunch of time in the City of London. Decided to go join a small startup called ISS. Moved to Atlanta. Had some good success at ISS. I joined in kind of relative early days. Decided I was living in Atlanta. My wife is from Trinidad. So if anyone's been to the south of the States, you probably understand that someone from Trinidad is not necessarily the best place to be. So I decided to go basically take a retirement job at Charles Schwab in San Francisco. For anyone who knows what Schwab is, Schwab's one of the biggest financial services companies in the States. We had $1 trillion of assets in a database in a big mainframe. So if you think about that, that's 1,000 billion amount of money. It's a damn lot of money, and you've got to figure out how to do this security stuff. It kind of puts a new perspective on it. my retirement job at Schwab became completely anything but. I started on October the 1st. On October the 3rd, we were on the front page of the Wall Street Journal for a security violation. So it was absolutely fantastic. The CIO came walking down the corridor. He goes, "Oh, I hear you're the new man who's going to fix all this problem." Well, great. 2 days in, it wasn't my problem. But essentially what I did at Schwab is I was responsible for building the security program. So getting all of the developers, 3,500 developers, we just had a ginormous infrastructure. We had people all around the world, people in Russia, people in the States, obviously, people in India. And fantastic company, and I kind of cut my teeth on learning software security there. During that time, I started this whole open web application security thing, and then decided to go join another startup. Anyone heard of Foundstone? Hacking Exposed books. So I joined them in about 2002. The idea was to take the experience learned at Schwab and go deploy some of those things, how to build security programs in large organizations. We sold that company to McAfee in 2004. Everyone had to stick around for 2 years. My stock vested on November 1st last year, and I left on November 2nd. So you can figure out what I thought about that company, right? Got to drink a bit of champagne. Life revolves around alcohol, in case you hadn't figured it out. So I decided then to move to France. Any French people here? Yeah. One French person, there you go. Not on strike today? No. So I've been living in France for about a year at this point, and I get to do this instead of drinking beer. Life is fantastic. France drives you mad for anyone who lives there. I've had a holiday house there for quite a long time, but I've only lived there for about a year, and nothing works. If my DSL breaks, it takes 2 weeks for someone to come out and decide whether they're going to fix it, and then 2 more weeks for the guy to actually turn up. Literally, it's 4 weeks to get my DSL fixed. It absolutely and utterly drives you mad. So 6 weeks ago, I decided to join Microsoft. I'd basically had pretty much about a year off. And most of my friends send me pictures like this. so I put it up so you don't have to bother creating your own. And it is absolutely true that when you join, the little chip that goes in the back of your neck doesn't hurt at all. So if anyone's considering joining, don't worry about it. So that's my intro. So like I said, I'm going to pick a whole bunch of topics. And the first topic is about how applications get built in the real world. So this is my experience. So at Foundstone, we used to have a lot of customers who would come to us and say, "Hey, can you build software development life cycles, do the same sort of stuff you did before?" And the naive approach was to say, how do you build software? And then say, okay, let's layer a whole bunch of security stuff onto that. This is what I discovered. The customer asks for this. The project manager interprets it like this. The business analyst interprets it like this. Anyone work for a Big Four? Not going to admit it now, right? Big Four guy comes in and says that. Developer decides to write this. Project gets documented like this. Operations install this. Gets billed like this. Supported like this. And what the customer really wanted was a swing, right? It's the same thing as up front. But it was quite an eye-opener for me, because what I used to do was used to say, how do you build software? And people would sit down and they'd tell, oh, we use the RUP, or we use this. Oh, here are all the touch points for that. And we used to build all this documentation and all this process. And then you realize that the shit doesn't work. Because what they supposedly build software, no one does that in the real world, right? And this is how real-world software gets built. So that was an eye-opener. And what I learned about that is that what you've got to do is figure out how software really gets built in organizations and not how people tell you it gets built. And those two things are completely different. So I think one of the fundamental problems that we have is a breakdown in communication. So this is a true story. So in the Second World War, there was this frigate trawling through, and on the horizon, they see a light. And that light is right in their shipping lane. So you know what this whole kind of law of shipping is. The biggest ship doesn't have to move, the smallest ship has to move. So the guy gets on the radio, he says, "I'm Commander so-and-so. I demand that you move, you're in my shipping path." The guy at the other end turns around and he says, "Oh, it's very interesting," but he said, "I'm the commander of this ship, I demand you move." At this point, this guy starts getting a little livid, right? He's like, no, you don't seem to understand. I'm the commander of this big, really important ship. I absolutely demand that you move. And so the pissing match starts, right? This guy then turns around, and he goes, "You know what?" He said, "I demand you move because I'm a lighthouse. So it's a true story. The ship ran aground, right? The ship genuinely ran aground. And why I think it's interesting from a security perspective is if you think how humans communicate over life and death issues, and then you think how they communicate security, it's pretty frightening. Absolutely frightening. And I think an awful lot of the issues and the things particularly I've seen in building corporate applications is because people don't communicate well what they want in terms of security. This is another classic example, right? I'll let you read that one for yourself while I have a beer. And say, oh, you have to protect yourself from a Smurf attack. What the fuck does that mean? It's bizarre, right? All right, so 2 topics down. I think there's about 10 topics to go. Half a beer down, so we're about a 3-beer talk, I reckon. So this stuff drives me mad, and it's driven me mad for a while. Sales and marketing stuff. Everyone needs to sell stuff, right? Everyone needs to market it. I have no issues with that. I work for Microsoft, right? Be hypocritical. But when I see things like this, it absolutely utterly drives me mad. This guy published a bunch of stuff on his blog, gets picked up by a whole bunch of Google alerts, everyone starts talking about it, starts getting reported in the press. This guy basically took the Firefox code base, ran it through a static code analysis tool, and basically came to the conclusion that Firefox is absolutely utterly hosed. It's kind of interesting. So this guy basically takes this stuff. He says, okay, so the original guy said there were 611 defects, 71 vulnerabilities found in Firefox, and he takes it to task. What he basically did is he discovered that it was this. Out of the 611 original defects and the 72 supposed vulnerabilities, actually 3 of them were real bugs. So if I was a statistician, I would come to this conclusion. The bloke who ran the tool, who worked for the company, his tool was 95.5% useless. Because 95.5% of the things that you claim were security issues in the first place actually weren't. And this stuff happens all the time. So I think that's a huge problem around the marketing stuff. Look at this as another example. Less than 1% false positives. I'll let you draw your own conclusions. How do you? Half of the stuff in the press. Few ethical hackers can provide simulated attacks with the level of sophistication that Sensic offers in its Hailstorm hacker-in-a-box penetration testing tool. It's like, okay, so let me either hire Dave Attell or use Hailstorm. Let me think about this one. Ooh, tough decision, right? It's kind of crazy. And all of this stuff as well, you see some of these things that get written up, and they're written up as kind of research papers, but at the end of the day, all they are is advertising stuff, right? So if you look at the way this thing was done and look at what they actually analyzed, there's no science behind what they did whatsoever. They basically took a canned application in a lab, pointed a tool at it. Those tools are designed to be running a canned application in a lab, and that's the way they work. So I think the whole kind of sales and marketing stuff is a real problem, and I love this quote from Wayne Gretzky. So Wayne Gretzky's the ice hockey player in the States, Stanley Cup guy. So, you know, you miss 100% of the shots you never take, right? It's the same with looking for security issues. You know? If you can't find where the issue is in the first place, you've got no hope in hell of finding it, and half of those tools don't understand where the issues are in the first place. So if you ever want to run one of those web scanning tools across a website, what I recommend you do is build something like an HTTP module, stick it in front of all the URLs, and see how much it finds. They don't find half of the stuff. So it's quite compelling. This stuff's happening all the time as well, right? I guess the Security 3.0 conference is going down the hall there. Hamster wheels of pain. Oh, they drive me mad. And that's from someone who, you know, Foundstone had a hamster wheel of pain. We created a hamster wheel of pain, and it was like, you know, you could see these sales guys like, oh, what you do? All you've got to do is follow the circle, sir, and everything's going to be fine. It's great. It's absolute and utter craziness. And just about every large company now has got a hamster wheel of pain, right? So people are going to start falling off the hamster wheels of pain before long. One of the other issues I kind of see is culture. And so maybe I'll come at this from a slightly different angle. So when I was at Schwab, I was paid by the corporate information security team, but I literally picked my office up and moved it into the development team because the security department was not necessarily well perceived. And I see this all the time, right? You go across corporate America, you talk to the security people, they tell you you're doing a fantastic job, they're building this great security program. You go talk to the developers, and they'll go, security people, right? All they do is say no to everything. And it's a massive problem with culture around how the security teams aren't giving the appropriate advice and all the counseling to all the dev teams. I mean,